Revelation 12, 7 to 11. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death."
Amen. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan was one of the guys getting baptized the other night. Had an awesome testimony. So, Revelation, we're getting into because we're continuing our series, The Invisible War. This is part 4 today. But this passage was actually inspired by Memorial Day, by reflecting on the weekend and what we're thinking about, what we're hopefully contemplating tomorrow, not just having barbecues and drinking beers and going out on the water, but actually reflecting and contemplating sacrifices that men and women have made. I was thinking about it the other day, and Memorial Day started in 1865. It was really, at the time, it was called Decoration Day. Yes, thank you. Decoration Day. And it broke out in many cities, in the north and the south. And it wasn't an official holiday, but people took a day to observe and to remember and to decorate the graves of fallen loved ones. And again, this happened throughout different cities in the north and south. It wasn't until 1968 when Congress passed that it would be the last Monday of May in its Memorial Day. But thinking about all the wars and all the campaigns that we were a part of, I was thinking, most of the men and women who sacrificed their lives, I believe, did it in good faith, that they were fighting for just causes and doing the right thing. But we know when we look at history, at least one side of any particular war, there was deception. People were deceived. The Civil War, for example, there was one side who believed strongly in slavery. And it was such a deep deception. Anthropologists at the time, in the 1860s, were using scientific data to say that black people were of a different, inferior species of sorts. And they were looking at scientific data with a worldview, and they were justifying it by rejecting the Genesis account of creation. They were saying that the Genesis account of creation cannot be true. It is not history. Which is basically, what's the lie that we looked at a couple weeks ago? The serpent came to the woman and said, "Did God really say?" And that's what they were believing. Did God really say that everybody came from one man and one woman? And they bought into a theory of pluralism of origins, where different races came from different places. So that, there was the birth of the white race and the birth of the black race. And so they bought into this belief that there's a hierarchy of species, right? Different races reflect a different kind of species of sorts. That's a delusion. That's a deception. Alexander Stephens was the vice president of the Confederacy, and he bought into this theory, and he believed that when Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, he said, well, back then, in the 1770s, they didn't have the science we have now. Isn't that what we do? They didn't have the science we have now. We know we can't trust God's word now because of our science. So they thought they had science that proved the Genesis account isn't true, and therefore they can rewrite their Constitution. Here's one of his quotes. He said, "Our government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas from the Bill of Rights. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and moral condition." That's an example of a gross deception, right? Now, we can look back now and go, yeah, that was deception, but it just continues. World War II is another example. Hitler right? What a deception that he was deceived himself, and then he led a whole group of people into that deception, and then a country and a big war, and many lives were lost. So I was thinking about this, and even closer to home, just the other night, this couple was killed out in Washington, D.C., 2 Israeli embassy staffers. They met working for the Israeli embassy. They fell in love. They were about to get engaged, and they were shot by someone who said, "Free Palestine," and believed that he was somehow fighting for a just cause by killing them, by gunning them down in the streets. Yaron Lechinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram. He was an evangelical Christian Jew. She had a heart to build bridges between Jews and Muslims. And some guy thought, let me shoot them down, and somehow that's going to do some good or bring him some significance. That's a deception. So much of the violence in this world is because of deception and delusion and people buying into lies. And so that led me to this passage in Revelation. It's a strange passage, but it's a passage where the Apostle John has the veil torn back, and Jesus shows him this cosmic battle that's happening behind the scenes. And this great Satan, symbolized by a dragon in John's vision, that is behind the death, the violence, the wars, the deception. The deception that has caused wars on a global scale, but also wars in our families, in our marriages, in our own hearts. And so we're going to unpack this. When the title for today is Remembering the Lamb who was slain and defeated the dragon. We're going to start in verse 1. Jonathan read verses 7 through 11. We're going to back it up just to get some context and go 1 to 12. Here's the thing about the book of Revelation. This is not a series through the book of Revelation. I cannot unpack everything there is to unpack. Maybe one day we'll do a series through the book of Revelation. That'd be fun. Revelation, a lot of people think Revelation end times. Don't think that. That's not what John was. I mean, it includes stuff about the end times, but it's also about present time. John wrote this to churches who were being squeezed by the Roman Empire on one side, and squeezed by Jesus rejecting Jews on the other side. Jewish Christians primarily in the middle, being squeezed, suffering persecution, suffering pain. And John is writing to encourage them. Jesus gave him a vision, pulled back the veil and said, this is what's going on. Write this down. And there's multiple visions throughout the book of Revelation, and the main purpose is to encourage followers of Jesus. It's apocalyptic literature is the genre for Revelation, so there's a lot of symbolism and figurative language. People debate a lot about what it means, and I might say something today, and you're like, wait a second, I watched a YouTube video, I don't think it means that. That's fine. I hope the main point is something we can agree on. The focus today is not on a timeline of end times. I don't even think that was John's primary priority. What I want us to notice is the theme of death and destruction, and then death being killed by death itself because the Lamb is slain. So let's just pray and we'll jump into it. Lord Jesus, I pray against any confusion that this passage might bring. I pray that you would help us, True Life Church, to live as people of the Lamb, who are on guard against the deceptions of the dragon and live as people of the Lamb. That's my prayer. I pray in your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, let's jump into it and see where it goes. Verse 1, a great sign appeared in heaven. Remember, John the Apostle is being given a vision, so this is what he sees. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. First sign, John sees a woman. Who's this woman? Some say this must be Mary, giving birth to Jesus. Some say it must be Eve, who gave birth to humanity. I think for John, he's writing to a Jewish audience. All of them are true. And Israel as a whole. Israel is actually called in the Old Testament our mother. And then Paul in the book of Galatians says that the New Jerusalem is our mother if we believe in Jesus. So think the people of God, but God working out his plan for his people through actual women giving birth. She's clothed with the sun, right? Radiant, with the moon under her feet. That speaks of dominion, and a crown of 12 stars. What does that represent? 12 tribes of Israel that are given birth through Israel, and then 12 apostles that are given birth. Mary gives birth to Jesus, and Jesus gives birth, in a sense, to 12 apostles who Christ builds his church upon. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Labor pains. And then verse 3, then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its head. That dragon represents the Satan, the accuser. With 7 heads, 7 is a number of completion, so this speaks of his universal power throughout the world. 10 horns, this echoes back to the book of Daniel. So John's audience would remember, oh, Daniel talked about those horns. A horn represented an earthly human ruler or king, someone with human power, and the crowns represent their authority. Now, this would speak about human kings and rulers who have opposed God's rule because they are being animated by, inspired by, influenced by, empowered by the dragon. So anytime a human ruler on the earth, because here's an important rule when you read the book of Revelation. It cannot mean for us something it did not mean for the original audience, because it was written to them, first century. It's preserved for us, but it wasn't written to us. It was written to them. So for them, they would be thinking about the Roman Empire with these pagan rulers who were oppressing and persecuting God's people. They might be thinking of their own Jewish people who had rulers that were corrupt and unrighteous. But John's just saying any ruler who's opposing God's plan of redemption is being animated by a dragon behind it. They have usurped God's authority. They might be in power, but they have taken it in an unrighteous way. Anybody see the movie Gladiator? Joaquin Phoenix's character, right? He became the emperor, but he wasn't the rightful emperor. Right? He killed his father, Marcus Aurelius, and took the throne. That's what this speaks about. Any human ruler in power who is opposing God's plans has usurped God's authority, sometimes unwittingly, because there's a dragon behind it. And I'm not saying that it's always intentional. Sometimes we looked at Peter last week. He was speaking against Jesus' plan. He didn't know what he was doing, and Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan." Any ruler, human ruler, who's opposing God's plan has the dragon at work behind it. Sometimes human rulers simply get caught up, simply get drunk on power, drunk on praise, and they get caught up. And they are not intentionally opposing God's plan. But let's keep going. Its tail, right, the dragon, its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. So what's this dragon doing? The stars falling from heaven symbolize chaos and destruction, because on the earth, Satan is trying to destroy the offspring of God's women in order to stop the plan of redemption. And again, for John's audience, for John's readers, they would think about the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, and all the way that the women in the Old Testament were attacked. Think about like all the things that we read that are offensive to us in the Old Testament. They speak not of what God condones, but they tell us about how the dragon was trying to stop God's plan of redemption. Eve is tricked by the serpent. Her first two sons, one of them, Cain, kills the brother Abel. Sarah battles barrenness later on. Rachel and Leah battle barrenness. Tamar is used and abused by Judah and then almost stoned to death. All these are offensive, troubling examples of how women are used, tricked, deceived, stopped, because the dragon is behind it, trying to stop them from giving birth and continuing God's plan of redemption, culminating in Mary giving birth to Jesus, the Christ child. And when he was born, King Herod tried to stomp out all the 2-year-olds and younger in Bethlehem, slaughtered them, had them all killed in an effort to kill the Messiah. But Mary and Joseph had escaped to Egypt. So John is showing this cosmic battle and saying the dragon has been at work all this time, and he is still trying to stop God's plan. Verse 5, she gave birth to a son, a male child, that's Jesus, who will, look at the quote, will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. That's a quote from Psalm chapter 2. It's a prophecy of the Messiah. Her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. So Jesus lived, died, rose again, ascended into heaven, is seated at the right hand of God. And then verse 6 says, the woman fled to the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. That would be a reference to a 3.5-year period. People debate that as well. I think there was a historical fulfillment of that. There was a present day fulfillment, and there was a possible future day fulfillment. I'll explain that. So in the book of Daniel, he spoke of a 3.5-year period. There was a sense in which that was fulfilled about 160 years before John wrote this, when the Syrian armies to the north kind of came on the attack against Israel, led by Antiochus Epiphanes, and Israel fought back. And there was a 3.5-year period of this guerrilla warfare, back and forth, bloody warfare, but it ended with a time of peace for Israel. It was temporary because the Romans would eventually come in, but it was a temporary moment of peace and stability for them where they had some independence. And I think John could be using that as a figure of speech because it's part of the Jewish identity. They know 3.5 years speaks about a time of guerrilla warfare, of bloody warfare. And so it's very possible that John is using that as a figure of speech to say, now that the Messiah has been ascended to heaven and seated on the throne, we, Christians, the people of God, are in this guerrilla warfare with the dragon. We're in this period of guerrilla warfare as we wait for him to return for us. Now, I think it's also possible that there's a future time when there's a literal 3.5-year period when things get amped up. And, you know, many of you know that would be part of the Great Tribulation. But again, it cannot mean for us what it did not mean for them. So for them, I think they would understand this as this is a time when the Christ child is on the throne, but we're also being kept by God during this guerrilla warfare while the dragon is still on the attack. Now, all this will hopefully make sense as we bring this together shortly. So hang in there. Verse 7, then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. So John, I think, is given a different vision now. I think verse 7 is a different vision. It's almost like if you picture a house right here, And Jesus says, hey, John, come here, peer in this window. I'm going to pull back the curtain, and you get to peer in. And then Jesus shuts the curtain and says, here, now come to another part of the house, and I'm going to pull back another curtain. Now look from this angle. And I think verse 7 is John seeing another angle, war breaking out in heaven, that mirrors this battle on the earth. But what happens here in heaven is that the dragon has lost. The dragon has been kicked down. Him and his angels have been defeated. And we know that Jesus' death and resurrection were the ultimate victory over Satan. They do not have power and authority anymore. They have been kicked down, thrown down, but he is still allowed to deceive. Until he is completely done away with, he is still allowed to deceive. Look at verse 9. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. That's actually the phrase that led me to this passage. Thinking about all the wars and all the deceptions and all the acts of terror that are done in this world, somebody has been deceiving, and it's this dragon who looks around at this earth and tries to deceive us into thinking things that are not true about God, things that are not true about God's word, right? I used the example earlier. Alexander Stevens said, we're going to do away with Genesis. We have science. We know that different races represent a hierarchy. That's a deception. And we still fall into that deception. We buy into lies about God. We buy into lies about each other, where it leads to us seeing other people as less than. They're not made in the image of God like I am. And sometimes it's the reverse. I'm not made in the image of God like they are. And we wallow in shame and guilt. And we've talked about that quite a few times in this series. But this can screw up the world. This can happen on a massive global scale. And it can happen on an individual level in our own hearts. I read a book last year called 10 Books That Screwed Up the World. It was good. It wasn't a Christian book. So I'm reading it, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to agree with it, but let's see where it goes. And at the end, I was like, wow, I think I agree with everything. And it wasn't until the epilogue, like the very, very end of the book, where I found out that the guy was a Christian. It was a good book. But I want to read a long quote from there as an example of some of the deception and the way that the dragon has worked. So bear with me. This is a long quote, okay? You guys can do it? Max, you can do it, right? If Max can do it, everybody can do it. That didn't come out right. I'm sorry, Max. In no small part, the carnage and confusion was caused by notions that the world, rather than human beings, needed to be saved from and for something. So this is the end of the book. He's summarizing everything. To save the world from political impotence, Machiavelli would have us embrace effective brutality. To save the world from skepticism, Descartes would have us become both more skeptical and more prideful. To save the world from industrial oppression, Marx and Lenin would have us annihilate half the world in revolution. To save the world from disease, poverty, and every social ill, Margaret Sanger and Adolf Hitler would have us eliminate the hordes of unfit. To save the world from male oppression, Betty Friedan would have women kill their offspring. What all our authors have grasped in one way or another is that something is wrong and it needs to be righted. But they have also suffered acutely from one terrible insight. If God really does not exist, then it is all up to us. So much of the deception that has happened in the world is people thinking there is something wrong, which is true. It's not sin in the human heart. It's those people. It's that system. So here, let's get rid of those people, or let's offer a different system. And that has just led to things getting screwed up even more. He continues, if this world is our only world, this life our only life, then it would seem that every effort, any means, and all passions, fair or foul, should be unleashed in an effort to transform the miseries of human life into a durable earthly happiness. That's a great deception. This is your only world. This is your only life. Fix it now. Fix those people now. Get yourself some happiness now, even at the cost of treating other people as less than human. Whether they be immigrants or unborn babies, you have a right to your own happiness. The authors we've examined who have taken a turn at twisting the screws that have screwed up the world all have this in common. They all deny sin. Perhaps we do need a final revolution, as Marx and Lenin would have it, but it is a revolution from within and from above. Perhaps we should, as Mill bids us, seek the greatest happiness of the greatest number, but by filling our souls with unearthly joy rather than merely feeding our earthly pleasures like pigs. Perhaps, as Nietzsche howled, God did indeed die, but rose again. And Übermensch, German word for Superman, of a very different kind, one that can save us from the madness of our own making. So the writer is saying, and I agree, that so much of the books that screwed up the world, movements that screwed up the world, are because people were deceived into thinking there is no sin in the human heart. God cannot fix this. Here's the solution. And we do this on an individual level. I'm not happy. That person must be the reason I'm not happy. They're a threat. They're an obstacle. And we treat people like that, even in our own homes. Or I'm not happy, therefore I need this in order to be happy. We talked about that. That's how we take created things and make them idols. Because we forget that someone has died and risen again and purchased life, life to the full. And the one who deceives the world wants us to say, no, 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 you get life over here. You get life over there. Don't look to the Christ. Now back to Revelation. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. Look at that last phrase. He knows that his time is short. He knows that he's been defeated. He knows that Jesus conquered him at the cross and in the resurrection. So he knows he's only got a limited amount of time to continue to try to deceive the world, to accuse us, the accuser of the brethren, he's called. But he's like someone who's losing a game, right, or losing a boxing match, and they know they're going to lose, so they just kind of go nuts flailing. Like, that's what he's doing. He's just kind of in his final moments of flailing, and he's trying to take as many people down with him as possible. But he's doing that not because he's strong and victorious, but precisely because he has lost. So when we are attacked spiritually, it is a reminder that he has lost, and that's why he's flailing like this. When we warn those getting baptized, hey, you might get spiritually attacked because the deceiver wants to come and make you think you're not saved. God's not good. God's not in control. But he's doing that precisely because he's been conquered. Precisely because he's lost the battle. That's why he's doing it. That's why he's doing his deceiving. That's why he whispers the lies. God doesn't love you, Chris. Not after you did that. Not after you thought that. Not after you responded like that. Anybody have moments in the last few hours where you had your ugliness in your heart exposed and the devil tried to come in and go, see, God can't love you. God doesn't want to use you. You can't be a pastor. Anybody ever? Sometimes he works like a defense attorney on one side, and he's egging me on. And this is how it feels for me. This is me. He's like egging me on. You don't have to take that from that person. Don't let anyone get anything over on you. Oh, respond back to them, and now, oh, you better fix that person. So he's egging me on. And I fall for it. I say something with an attitude, get sharp, and then he comes in as the prosecutor on the other side. Oh, you're so bad. You do not represent Jesus with that one. He does not want anything to do with you. And this is back and forth. Defense attorney coming in, oh, go get him. And then the prosecutor coming in, how dare you? What will save me from these accusations? Go back to verse 11. They, the people of God, the people of the Messiah, the people of Jesus, triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. How do we defeat the great dragon who is at work pulling strings behind the scenes on a global scale, on an individual scale, the dragon who wants to create death and destruction? How do we defeat him? 3 things: the blood of the Lamb. Jesus died. Jesus purchased life through his death. And we remember that. It's one reason why we gather. So, because all the whispers in our heads, all the accusations, we need to remember Jesus died for me because he loves me. And it doesn't matter how strong your faith is on any given day. It doesn't stop the fact that he died for you. If I'm holding on to the cross of Jesus and Rigo's holding on to the cross of Jesus, one day I might struggle with guilt and shame and feel like God can't forgive me, man. I'm such a loser. And Rigo's filled with confidence. Oh, yes, Jesus is awesome, and I feel his forgiveness. Who's forgiven? Who's more forgiven? Neither one. We're just hanging on to the cross. We're not saved by how strong our faith is. We're saved by who our faith is directed at. Because the next day, Rigo might be the one struggling, and I'm filled with faith. We're saved by the blood of the Lamb. That would echo for John's audience back to Egypt, back to the days of the Exodus, when the Passover was first instituted. When the people of God, the Israelites, were slaves in Egypt, God was going to send a final plague through the land of Egypt to try to get Pharaoh to say, fine, you can finally go. Release them from slavery. And it was the plague of the angel of death coming to kill the firstborn. And the Israelites would not be saved because they were ethnic Hebrews. Only by faith in the blood of a lamb put on the doorpost, and they take shelter under that blood. 2 people, I heard this example from a pastor named Don Carson. He said, imagine this. Imagine 2 Hebrews. One's going into their house with the blood on it, and the other one's next door going into their house with the blood on it. And they talk, before they do, they say, hey, one of them says, are you really nervous? I'm really scared about this. And the other one says, no, God told Moses what to do. We're going to put the blood on, and we're going to be fine. And the other one says, yeah, I know, and I'm doing it, but I'm really scared. They both go in. One's filled with faith. The other one's a little nervous. Who gets saved? They both do. They both do. So when our faith is faltering, when we're struggling, the good news is it doesn't matter. We're still saved. We're still under the blood. And that in itself should strengthen our faith. That's number 1. Number 2, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. This is the proclamation of the gospel and how it has impacted our lives. We get to talk about it, remind each other about it. Me and Rigo, right? He's having a down day. I get to remind him of what God's done in his life. This is why we gather, not only on Sundays, but in our life groups. This is why we had our baptism ceremony, where we celebrated with the 4 people getting baptized the other night. And we had them share testimony of what God has done. How did God get a hold of your heart? Because it reminds us all that the dragon has been defeated. And then lastly, they did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. John is writing to a group of Christians in the Roman Empire who will face persecution. Many of them will die. By the time John wrote this, there was a wave of systematic persecution, and it was going to get worse and worse. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. He's saying, guys, you know how you defeat the dragon, the one who's causing so much death? By being willing to die. Not by fighting back with the sword and spear. Not by a nuclear war. By being willing to die. Who can stop the person who doesn't love their lives so much that they don't shrink from death. Who can stop them? Nobody can stop them. Because like, yeah, you kill me, you chop off my head, you feed me to a lion, I'm getting my body back. Because my God conquered the grave, and he's given me a new body. You can't stop that person. And we know from history that Christians who were executed for their faith were the reason other pagans became Christians. As they watched them die, they said, wow, there's something about their faith. And the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. That is a saying because it's true, historically. Now, we in America, we don't face that same kind of persecution. So does that apply to us? I would say yes. I would say yes, because think about all the things that lead up to death and surround death that we do get afraid of. We might not have a fear of being killed for our faith right now, but heck, we're afraid of aging, aren't we? We're afraid of looking old because it's a sign of death. It's a sign of, oh, my younger days are over. And we forget, no, my best days are ahead of me if I believe in the resurrection. Don't love your life so much that you fear aging and get obsessed with longevity and taking care of your body. Do it. Do it. Moderation. But there's a whole industry hoping that you make it an idol. And there's a dragon behind that industry saying, yes, get deceived, get obsessed with this over here, so you take your eyes off of Jesus. Don't love security so much that you shrink from taking God-glorifying risks. We love our security, don't we? We love our security, our retirement plans. Don't love your life so much that you shrink from taking God-glorifying risks, even in your 80s. Don't love the acceptance of people so much that you shrink from rejection. You know who the most loving people are? The ones willing to face rejection. You reject me, I'm going to love you anyway. That's what Jesus did. But when we're so afraid of rejection, we close up, we wall up, and we reject people before they can reject us. And that's how the dragon gets us. That's a deception that the dragon uses. Makes us feel like we're winning by isolating. We're not winning. He's winning. Don't love your comfort so much that you idolize self-care. It's a whole other industry. Take care of yourself. Exercise. Go to the sauna. But don't make it an idol. We love to make that an idol. Don't love success so much that you idolize your work and your accomplishments. Don't idolize political power so much that you pledge allegiance to people who throw out Bible verses but do not have the spirit of the Lamb. Christians win the war with Satan, but not through power, but by being killed and praising Jesus as you die. That's how we defeat the dragon, by following in the way of the Lamb. I'm going to call the band down. I'm going to ask you to stand. I'm going to read one more passage over us before we sing a little bit. Romans 16:20, the Apostle Paul said this, "The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet." Now, Satan has been defeated, but he has not been completely eradicated. And Paul is saying to you and I, the God of peace will soon crush Satan. He'll do the crushing, but he will do it under your feet. Your feet. How? What we just talked about. Our faith in the blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony, and not loving our lives so much that we shrink from death. Hold our lives loosely. We defeat the dragon by believing he was already defeated by an empty tomb that is the first of many empty tombs. Jesus, we want to be a people of the Lamb. On this Memorial Day weekend, as we remember men and women who have sacrificed their lives for our earthly freedoms. We worship you, who came and became the ultimate sacrificial lamb, a lamb that was slain to defeat the dragon. And now we stand victorious. Help us to see the accusations and the deceptions that we're tempted to buy into. Help us to reject them. Help us to stand strong. Help us to hold our lives loosely, remembering that the best is yet to come. I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Let's worship the Lamb together for a few moments.